You're out of your depth. Maybe look for something in your price range, like a parking spot.
One sentence. I want the whole building.
My wife told me 20,000 yuan was nothing. 3 years later, I bought a building for 76 million in cash while she stood there with her mouth hanging open. But the money is not the story. My 7-year-old son is. He was reborn, carrying a full lifetime of memories from a future that had not happened yet. And somehow, for reasons I will never understand, I could hear every thought in his head, every business idea, every billion yuan opportunity, every secret from decades away, poured straight into my skull without him ever opening his mouth. He thought he was secretly guiding his naive father. I let him believe it, and I built 3 empires on his stolen whispers. This is how it started. September 1998, the Linjiang cotton mill posted its layoff list, and my name sat right there in the first row. 27 years old, married, 1 son, 0 prospects. They handed me a severance envelope with 20,000 yuan inside and a handshake that meant absolutely nothing. The apartment smelled like cheap Dakyanman cigarettes because I had been chain smoking since dawn. Our place was one of those tube-shaped units in the old worker housing blocks, dim even at noon, furniture older than my marriage, paint peeling off the walls like the building itself wanted to give up. Su Yun walked out of the bedroom. She was painting her lips in front of the hallway mirror, and through it, she looked at me the way you look at a stain on your shoe. She told me the marriage was over. Her exact words do not matter. The tone said everything, shrill, cold, already halfway out the door in her mind. When I tried to reason with her, tried to explain that 20,000 yuan was enough to get us through while I found new work, she cut me off mid-sentence. 20,000? What could 20,000 do? Old Wang next door had spent 5,000 just on a gold bracelet for his wife. She wanted happiness. She wanted out. Her high heels clicked across the floor. Clack, 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 and the door slammed shut behind her. I leaned my head back against the sofa and laughed. Not a real laugh, the kind that scrapes the inside of your throat. Happiness, right. I had heard the rumors at the factory. Su Yun and some bald building materials, boss named Liu, had been getting awfully close for months. Everyone knew except the idiot sitting on this couch. That idiot was me. The wall clock read 7:30, weekend morning. I still had to wake my son for breakfast and get him to his cram school, the elite tutoring Su Yun had insisted on, paid for entirely with my money, naturally. Even while demanding a divorce, she had not relaxed her grip on the boy's schedule or my wallet. I pushed open Chen Xiaodian's bedroom door. My 7-year-old was sprawled face down on the mattress, quilt kicked to the floor, sleeping like the world owed him nothing. For a moment, I just stood there looking at him. Then I picked up the quilt, gave his backside a gentle pat, and told him the sun was already high. He groaned, rubbed his eyes, sat up slowly, and then something changed. The sleepy, dopey look on his face vanished, just gone, replaced by a shock so intense his pupils dilated, followed by a wave of wild, disbelieving joy. His eyes locked onto my face, then darted around the room. The chipped dresser, the yellowed certificates on the wall, the cracked window frame. Then a voice exploded inside my skull, not from the room, not from outside. Inside my head, loud and clear, like someone had jammed headphones directly into my brain. My son's voice, except his lips never moved. Holy crap, the voice said. This is the old house? And then, this young, handsome guy is my short-lived dad? I nearly fell over. My hand shot out and grabbed the doorframe. I looked around the room in raw terror. Empty. Just me and the boy. His mouth was shut. Completely shut. But the voice kept going, marveling about rebirth and power fantasies and decades of memories. And my heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. He looked up at the calendar on the wall. September 1998, the voice said. Oh no, this is the month Dad got laid off. My son was sitting in bed, examining his own small hands, grinning one second, frowning the next. A 7-year-old body with something ancient behind his eyes. I did not understand it. Not then. Maybe not ever. But I understood enough. My son's thoughts were pouring into my head, and those thoughts contained the future. I forced my face into a mask, swallowed everything, told him to get up, wash his face, brush his teeth. Eggs were in the pot. He hopped off the bed, said, "Okay, Daddy," in his sweet little voice, and trotted off to the bathroom on his short legs, like nothing had happened. I stood in the doorway with my fists at my sides and a furnace lit behind my ribs. That evening, there was a soft knock at the door. It was Lin Meifeng, the neighbor from across the hall, 28, widowed 2 years, raising her daughter alone. She had heard the argument that morning. Of course she had. These walls were made of tissue paper. She stood in the doorway, holding a bowl of steaming hand-pulled noodles, her hair still damp from a bath, smelling of clean shampoo. She did not pry, did not ask what Su-Yun said, just told me she had made extra noodles, and maybe the boy was hungry. A close neighbor is better than a distant relative, she said, with the kind of quiet smile that costs nothing and means everything. I took the bowl and thanked her. She left without lingering. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and smoked until the pack was empty. The noodles were good. The silence was unbearable. But underneath the silence, something was growing, a strange electric awareness that my life had cracked open and light was leaking through the fracture. The next morning, over breakfast, I watched my son eat his eggs and listened. Not with my ears, with whatever new channel had opened inside my head. His thoughts rolled in like radio static tuning into a clear signal. He was thinking about his mother. That snobbish woman, the voice said, is going to abandon Dad and me this month. Ran off with that bald boss Liu. My chopsticks stopped moving. Then, the voice said something that punched the air out of my lungs. Poor Dad. He was cheated on and still tried to save the marriage. Moved bricks at construction sites to pay for my schooling. Ended up paralyzed from a work injury before he was even 40, lying in bed for the rest of his life. I set the chopsticks down, very carefully. My fists clenched under the table until my knuckles went white. Paralyzed, work injury, bedridden, not even 40 years old. That was my future. The one I was walking straight into, blind and stupid if nothing changed. And then, like a switch had been flipped, the voice in my head changed its tune entirely. It is 1998. There is gold everywhere. Internet cafes. The boys' thoughts tumbled over each other. Computers were rare. Young people were desperate to play games. Red Alert, StarCraft, Legend of Sword, and Fairy. A single machine running all day could net 70 or 81 profit. 5 machines meant 300 to 400 a day, over 10,000 a month. A factory director made 800. My hand shook. Cigarette ash fell on my knuckles, and I barely felt the burn. Over 10,000 a month. The number was so absurd, it almost made me laugh again. But this time, the laugh wanted to come from somewhere real. I stubbed out the cigarette, looked at my son. He was slurping noodles without a care in the world. But inside his head, a business plan was unfolding with the precision of an accountant and the enthusiasm of a gambler. He wanted me to succeed, this strange ancient soul wearing my little boy's face. He was handing me a rope out of the pit. The question was whether I had the guts to grab it. I pretended to sigh. Xiaotian, after breakfast, Dad is going out to look for odd jobs. The factory is gone. Things will be tight for us. His thoughts screamed, odd jobs? Dad, can you not have a bit more vision? It is 1998, out loud, in his innocent little boy voice. He told me his classmates loved going to computer rooms to play games, that people had to wait in line, that Uncle Wang next door said the owner made several hundred a day. I let him talk, I let him hint, and I let the fire build. Then, I slapped my thigh and stood up. Fine, I said. Keeping this money in a drawer will just waste it away. Xiaotian, walk with me. We are going to Computer City. The timid starve. The bold feast. That was the only rule I had left. Linjiang Computer City sat on Liberation Road, the busiest street in the city center. In 1998, it was the temple of high technology, noisy, crowded, and full of people who thought they were smarter than you. I walked in holding my son's hand, 20,000 yuan in my pocket, and absolutely no idea what a motherboard looked like. But my son did. The first shop had a sales girl who sized me up in half a second. Working class clothes, rough hands, easy target. She started pushing a Pentium 2 setup for 12,000 yuan, smiling like she was doing me a favor. Inside my head, my son's voice went nuclear. 12,000? Daylight robbery. Leftover stock. The Pentium 2 233 was already obsolete. The real value was in something called a Celeron 300A. Overclock it, and it rivaled machines twice its price. And the graphics card she was pushing was an antique. The whole rig was worth 5,000 tops. I let her finish her pitch. Then, I set down the water glass, looked her dead in the eye, and said the configuration was dishonest. I want a Celeron 300A, I said. MSI 6163 motherboard, 64 megabytes of PC100 RAM, 2 Voodoo 2 graphics cards for SLI, and a 6.4 gigabyte Quantum Fireball hard drive. I rattled off every spec my son had been thinking, and I watched her jaw unhinge. An expert, her eyes said. An absolute expert. It was the greatest performance of my life. I had no idea what half those words meant, but she did not know that. And my son, standing beside my leg, was staring up at me with an expression of pure, baffled admiration. I held up 5 fingers. 5 units to start. If the machines work well, I will come back every month to restock. Her attitude flipped like a switch. Suddenly, I was Brother Chen, and she was offering dinner and internal pricing and anything else I wanted. I let her scramble. 5 computers, a storefront near the 3rd middle school, 60 square meters, $800 a month, right on the path every student and dropout had to walk. 2 industrial fans because my son's thoughts reminded me that 5 CRT monitors would turn the room into a furnace. A second-hand freezer stocked with Coke and Sprite. Shelves full of instant noodles and ham sausages because the boy's voice told me that snack margins were where the real money hid. My son suggested the name, Storm Computer Room. He dressed it up in a childish voice, said heroes on television always appeared with storms. But inside his head, he was thinking about brand identity and market psychology and aggressive naming conventions. I painted the sign myself, red oil paint on raw wood, 5 characters written with the kind of brush strokes that come from a man who has nothing left to lose. The last stroke trailed off into a long, sharp tip, brimming with an energy I had not felt in years. The sign was not even dry when 3 long-haired kids in wide-legged jeans came swaggering up the alley. They saw the name, saw the fans, saw the cold mist rising from the Coke bottles in the freezer, and their eyes went wide. "Boss, do you have red alert?" I stood up from my chair, stubbed out my cigarette, and smiled. Brand new machines, top configurations. No lag, no stutter. And today is grand opening. Everyone gets a free chilled Coke. They slapped their money on the counter before I finished the sentence. The startup beep of 5 fresh computers filled the room. Keyboards clattered. Voices shouted about tank rushes and base defenses. The fans hummed. The freezer buzzed. And I stood behind the counter with cash in my hand and a grin I could not kill. Storm Computer Room was open for business. 1 week ago, I was a laid-off factory worker with a cheating wife, a dwindling severance, and a future that ended in a wheelchair. Now, I had 5 machines printing money, a son whose brain contained decades of tomorrow, and a rule I intended to follow until it killed me or made me rich. The timid starve, the bold feast. I chose to feast. The first night, none of the 5 machines rested for a single minute. The 3 long-haired kids booked an all-night session. 2 more showed up an hour later and did the same. By 8 in the morning, they refused to leave and paid for another round. A handful of others dragged stools in just to sit behind the players and watch, pointing at the screens, begging for a turn. I pulled open the cash drawer and counted 480 yuan. Small bills mostly, 5s and 10s. But the thickness of that stack in my hand was the most beautiful thing I had ever held. At the cotton mill, breaking my back for a full month, including the perfect attendance bonus, I brought home a little over 400 one day. I had matched a month's wages in one day. I leaned back in my chair and laughed. A real laugh this time, not the hollow scraping kind. This was not running a shop. This was legal robbery, but the laughter did not last. Because every hour, someone new walked in, looked at 5 occupied machines, and walked out again. My son's voice was already doing the math in my head. Lost customers, lost revenue, money evaporating into the air because I did not have enough seats. I needed muscle, and I needed machines. My cousin Li Jicheng showed up the same afternoon I called him. 6'1", dark-skinned from years on construction sites, arms like bridge cables. He stood in the doorway of Storm Computer Room, looking at the glowing monitors like a farmer who had wandered into a spaceship. I slapped his shoulder and told him the job was simple. Collect money, turn on machines, sell instant noodles, and if anyone caused trouble, show them those arms. He thumped his chest so hard the Coke bottles rattled. Nobody, he said, would act wild on his watch. With my Iron Tower cousin standing guard at the door, the punks who used to swagger and demanding discounts became as quiet as rabbits, and I could finally sleep. But I did not rest. I counted. 5 machines, 24 hours a day, 7 days straight. After electricity and Li Jicheng's salary, net profit 3,200 yuan, more than half a year's wages from the mill in a single week. My hands shook looking at that stack of bills, and then they stopped shaking. Because 3,000 was not enough, not even close. My son, sitting in his exclusive little chair next to the counter, sipping a glass bottle Coke, was already thinking what I was thinking. Too slow, his voice said. Only 12 machines and the ceiling is already showing. Look at that guy playing StarCraft. His elbow hits the person next to him every time he moves the mouse. Need to expand, must expand. He was right. The room was packed to the gills. 12 monitors, 2 freezers, 2 industrial fans, bodies crammed shoulder to shoulder. The air was a stew of cigarette smoke, instant noodle broth, and young men's sweat. The fans could not keep up, but the customers did not care. They lined up. They waited for hours. Some showed up at 5 in the afternoon just to claim a spot for the overnight session, eating dinner right there at the keyboard. I mortgaged the old apartment. An accountant from my factory days worked at the credit union and pushed the paperwork through. With the cash, I rented the second floor, 160 square meters of abandoned warehouse space above the shop, $1,200 a month, a steal. I called Sun Chen, 18 new computers, same specs. She showed up in a tight white shirt and denim shorts, directed the workers upstairs, then grabbed a rag and started wiping down the tables herself. Sweat trickled down her neck, and she threw me a look that had nothing to do with computers. I told her to finish the work first, business before pleasure. The night we opened the second floor, all 30 machines filled in under half an hour. The news had spread to every school and pool hall within walking distance. Upstairs and downstairs, the sounds blended into one roar. Keyboards, shouts, fans, the fizz of opened sodas. I sat at the counter collecting money until my fingers cramped. Before, I counted bills one by one. Now, I counted them in stacks. And then it happened. A man and a woman passed the open doorway. He was in his 40s, balding, briefcase under his arm, face greasy under the streetlight. She wore a red dress and clung to his arm like she belonged there. Su Yun. She was heading to dinner with Boss Liu when the noise pulled her eyes inside. That one glance froze her mid-step. She saw me. Leather jacket, healthy glow, cigarette between my fingers, fistful of cash as I made change for a customer. Beside me, Sun Qian was leaning on the counter, laughing at something I had said, her shoulder practically touching mine. I could imagine what ran through her mind. How long since the divorce? A month? Where did he get the money? Who was that woman? Younger, longer legs, dressed like a magazine cover? Boss Liu glanced in, snorted, and muttered something about an illegal internet cafe and hard-earned pittance. He tugged her arm toward the seafood restaurant down the street. She followed, but she kept turning her head back. I never saw any of it. Not the red dress, not the balding man, not the look on her face. I was listening to my son, who was sitting at the top of the stairs, licking a popsicle, his small brain firing on cylinders that had nothing to do with his age. 30 machines, his voice said. Daily turnover, at least 2,000, 60 to 70,000 a month, but that is not enough. Need a chain, need a brand. The pedestrian street, that is the traffic hub of Linjiang. 100 machines in a mall there. That would be a true cash cow. Su Yun was already irrelevant. I was listening to the future. Months passed. The snowball rolled faster than I could believe. A flagship store opened on the 3rd floor of the commercial building on Pedestrian Street. Over 300 square meters, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the busiest intersection in the city. Sister Hong, the landlady, wanted $7,000 a month. I paid a full year up front in cash and watched her eyes go wide counting the stack. 70 brand new machines. Then a membership system built by a nervous college kid named Zhao Kai, an internet cafe billing software that let customers prepay, recharge, and log in across stores. Recharge 500, get 100 free. Recharge 1,000, get 300. The math was simple, and in 1998, people spent money the moment they had it. On the first day of the membership drive, over 100 new members signed up. More than 40,000 yuan in recharges in a single day. I sat in the back office staring at the numbers, forgetting to smoke the cigarette between my fingers. Weekend revenue hit 30,000 a day. 30,000. The number was so large it stopped feeling real, the way a word stops sounding like a word when you repeat it enough times. But my son's voice kept repeating it and adding to it. Shanghai, the voice whispered. Shanghai is the real stage. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the pedestrian street flagship, cigarette in hand, and looked east. 300 kilometers away, a city was swallowing the future whole. Bigger population, higher spending power, internet cafes still stuck in the dark workshop era, rows of machines in smoky rooms with no service and no vision. My boy thought I had terrible taste. Country bumpkin aesthetics, he called it. All those young and dangerous posters. He was right, but he also handed me the blueprint. Leather sofas, freshly ground coffee, zoned management, a dedicated ladies section where no man was allowed to smoke or shout. A concept that did not exist yet in all of China. I boarded a train to Shanghai, 3 hours, staring out the window, heart hammering. When I stepped out of the railway station and looked at the skyline, the glass towers, the rivers of traffic, the sheer scale of it, I felt small for the first time in months. Good. Small meant there was room to grow. 3 days I scouted, visited every major internet cafe in the city. They were bigger than Linjiang's, sure, but they were all the same. Smoky, loud, charmless. I rented 500 square meters in Pudong, $32,000 a month. My hand trembled signing that lease. That price could rent an entire street back home. I slammed my son's sketches in front of the renovation foreman. Leather sofas, no smoking zones, a coffee bar, a ladies section with frosted glass and pink walls, and a small cactus beside every monitor. The foreman looked at the drawings like I had lost my mind. I told him money was not a problem, and it was not. The 2 Linjiang stores were printing cash around the clock, funding everything. Shanghai fell, 1 store, then 2, then 5. Leather sofa internet cafes with self-service systems and membership recharge schemes that vacuumed money off the street. White-collar women who had never set foot in an internet cafe walked in, saw the ladies section, and recharged 1,000 yuan on the spot. College students who lived on instant noodles scraped together 500 just to get the bonus. The lines stretched out the door on opening day and never really went away. By November of 1999, I had 7 stores across 2 cities, each one running more than 200 machines. Net profit, over 100,000 yuan a day, 100,000 daily, in an era when an average salary was a few hundred a month. But most men at this point would have leaned back, lit a cigar, bought a car and a bigger apartment, and told themselves they had made it. I did buy a car, a black Audi A6, drove it back to Linjiang at the end of December, the new millennium on the horizon, the whole world celebrating. My son was on the sofa eating watermelon with a spoon when I walked in. He jumped into my arms. I kissed his face and felt his small hands grip my collar. For a moment, the numbers stopped. The spreadsheets went quiet. It was just a father holding his boy. Then I put him down and the voice started up again. He was thinking about a game, a Korean game called Legend of Mir, made by a company called Wemade. The agency fee was only 300,000 US dollars, but the man who bought those rights in his timeline, a man named Chen Tianqiao, rode that single game to become the richest person in China by 2004. Tens of billions. From one game, $300,000 for tens of billions. I memorized the name, Wemade, South Korea, 2001. And there was something else circling in his thoughts. A little penguin, a chat program that half the kids in my internet cafes were using. Run by a company that was bleeding money, on the verge of collapse. Its founder so desperate, he had nearly sold the whole thing for 600,000 yuan. Nobody wanted it. My son thought it was the bargain of the century, a future multi-trillion-dollar empire, available for pocket change. I sat on the sofa in my old apartment, my son's head resting against my shoulder, and I stared at the wall. 21 stores now, across Jiangsu and Zhejiang. 10.2 million yuan in a single month. 2 new locations opening every 30 days. An empire built in a year and a half from a 20,000 yuan severance check and a secret I could never tell anyone. But the internet cafes were not the endgame. They were the war chest. Somewhere in South Korea, a game was waiting. Somewhere in Shenzhen, a penguin was dying, and I was the only man alive who knew what they would become. I stubbed out my cigarette, pulled my son closer, and listened. 21 stores, 10.2 million a month, 2 new locations every 30 days. But empires do not run themselves. I needed hands, the right hands. I flew back to Shanghai and walked into the VIP room at my Zhuhui branch with a stack of resumes thicker than a brick. Zhao Kai had screened them, all university graduates. A year earlier, I could not have imagined sitting in a leather chair interviewing college-educated candidates. Now they were lining up. I hired 3 people in 2 days. First, an old accountant, everyone called Lao Wu, state enterprise veteran, the kind of man who sleeps with a calculator under his pillow. He would keep the books clean. Second, a woman named Lin Wan, operations manager, dark business suit, gold-rimmed glasses, the composure of someone who had managed real budgets. I told her she would handle the entire Yangtze River Delta expansion, site selection, equipment, staffing, all of it. Her eyes lit up like I had just handed her a kingdom. Good. I needed a general, not a secretary. Third was Su Qing. She walked in wearing a fitted black skirt and sat across from me with her resume folded neatly on her lap. University of Finance and Economics, top school. She had spent a year at a large state-owned enterprise before quitting. I asked her the obvious question. Why would a graduate from a prestigious university leave a stable government job to work at an internet cafe that smelled like cigarette smoke? She told me the truth. First, the money. My job posting offered 3,000 to 4,000 a month, double her old salary. Second, her previous boss was a predator. He had tried to assault her on a business trip. She slapped him and walked out. Then, she said something that made me sit up. She said an ordinary internet cafe owner does not build a formal management team. An accountant, an operations manager, a university-educated assistant. That setup means bigger ambitions, a larger project. She said she studied marketing, and she wanted to follow someone who was actually going somewhere. I looked at this woman, 23 years old, sharp, slightly nervous, tugging at the hem of her skirt without realizing it. but her eyes were steady. I hired her on the spot, $3,500 during probation, $4,000 after. I told her if she performed well, her year-end bonus would buy her an apartment. Her hands were warm and slightly damp when she shook mine. I could feel the hunger in that handshake. Not greed, hunger. The kind that comes from finally finding the door you have been looking for. With the team locked in, I did what my son's thoughts had been screaming about for months. I went shopping, not for computers, not for storefronts, for dirt. Shanghai first. I walked into a sales office in Pudong with $2 million in cash flow behind me and told the saleswoman I wanted 10 apartments. Her name was Wang Qian. She was fresh in the industry, maybe 3 weeks. When I pointed at the model and said 10 units, her floor plan fell out of her hands and clattered on the tile. In 1999, Pudong was still farmland, turning into a construction site. Riverview apartments were going for 3,200 yuan per square meter. I bought 2 luxury units on the Bund, 4 in Pudong's new development zone, and 4 school district properties in the old city. Total price, just under 3 million. I put down less than $1 million and financed the rest. Leverage was cheap and policies were loose. Only a fool would pay in full. That was not debt. Those were lottery tickets I already knew the winning numbers to. Then, I flew to Beijing. The capital's real estate market was even more absurd. Apartments inside the second ring road were going for $1,800 to $3,200 a square meter. I found a real estate agent named Zhou Min and told her I wanted 6 apartments and a courtyard house. A real one, detached, clear title. She said courtyard houses were nearly impossible. Most were carved up among a dozen families. The property rights, a nightmare. I told her money was not a problem. Find it. It took a week. We drove through the hutongs in her company's old Santana, through narrow alleys where the walls still carried Qing dynasty brickwork, and she found 2 detached Sihayuan, right at the foot of the Forbidden City. One owned by an elderly professor whose son had emigrated. Asking price, 2.6 million. The other was slightly farther out, still inside the second ring road. 2 million. I bought both, plus 6 ordinary apartments she recommended. On the night I signed the last contract, I lay on my hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. 2 courtyard houses and 7 apartments within the second ring road of Beijing. 10 apartments in Shanghai, all purchased with minimal down payments and maximum leverage. In 20 years, any single one of those courtyard houses would be worth more than my entire internet cafe empire. But nobody knew that yet. Nobody except me and the 5-year-old boy eating watermelon on my sofa back in Shanghai, whose thoughts were already racing toward the next target. And the next target was not real estate. It was a Saturday afternoon, late summer of 2000. I had just returned from Beijing and was sitting in my Shanghai apartment reading a newspaper. Xiao Tian was next to me on the sofa, his legs too short to reach the floor, a tablet of chocolate in one hand and a computer magazine in the other. He flipped a page, then another. Then he stopped. His thoughts exploded. It started with a name, Legend of Mir 2, a Korean game made by a company called Wemade. He was reading an article about online gaming in South Korea, and his mind was pulling up everything he knew from a future that had not happened yet. The game had just entered open beta in South Korea, he thought. Performance in the domestic Korean market was average, not a blockbuster. But when a Chinese entrepreneur named Chen Tianqiao from a company called Shanda approached them the following year, he acquired the distribution rights for only $300,000. And that single game made him the richest man in China by 2004. Tens of billions from $300,000. I turned a page of my newspaper. I did not look up. But then my son's thoughts took a darker turn. He was thinking about what happened after the money started flowing. The Korean developers got jealous. They saw the rivers of cash pouring into China, and they wanted it back. They created obstacles, tried to revoke the distribution rights, lawsuits, endless lawsuits. And the worst part, because of the copyright disputes, the game's source code leaked. Private servers flooded the market, cheat programs everywhere. The game's lifespan was cut short. Shanda's golden goose was strangled by the very people who sold it. My son frowned at his magazine. His chocolate was melting, forgotten. Then came the thought that changed everything. Why just buy agency rights? He wondered, when the real play is to buy the entire company. Wemade was just a subsidiary, a small subsidiary of a company called Actos, with no money and no leverage. Buy Wemade outright, and you own the source code, the development team, and every future dollar the game will ever make. No Korean developer getting jealous, no lawsuits, no leaked code, no private servers, one purchase, total control. He estimated it would cost about $1 million US, more than the agency fee, but a permanent solution. And the money did not need to come all at once. Pay a down payment, launch the game in China, and the cash flow would cover the rest within months. A snake swallowing an elephant. I sat behind my newspaper and felt something cold run down my spine. Not fear, recognition. My 5-year-old son had just laid out a hostile acquisition strategy, more sophisticated than anything I had heard in a boardroom. He had identified the risk, traced it to the source, and proposed a solution that eliminated the entire problem at the root. I folded the newspaper slowly. I already had close to $400,000 US in a foreign exchange account. The internet cafes were generating over 10 million yuan a month. Online games like King of Kings and Stone Age were launching across China, and the kids in my own cafes were staying up all night playing them. The era of online gaming was arriving exactly when my son said it would. The timing was now. I stubbed out my cigarette and looked at my son, who was now licking chocolate off his fingers, completely unaware that his idle thoughts had just set the course for a trip across the sea. I was going to South Korea, and I was not going to buy agency rights. I was going to buy the whole company. 3 days later, I was sitting in a conference room on the 14th floor of Octo's headquarters in Seoul, watching a man named Park Chang-min twirl a pen between his fingers like he owned the world. Between us sat a beautiful translator named Kim Mi-yeon. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed a gray Seoul skyline. The room smelled like stale coffee and cheap leather. Park opened exactly how I expected. He leaned forward, flashed a salesman's grin, and told me through Kim Mi-yeon that the licensing fee for Legend of Mir 2 was $1 million US. He said it like he was doing me a favor. Then he leaned back, still twirling that pen, and waited for me to flinch. I did not flinch. I let the silence stretch. 5 seconds, 10. Park's pen twirling slowed by half a rotation. Manager Park, $1 million US is outrageous, I said. My voice was calm, almost bored. Over 8 million yuan for a game with an uncertain future? This game has been in open beta for half a month in your own country, and the user numbers are underwhelming. With results like that, you dare ask for $1 million? Kim Mi-yeon translated. Park's face stiffened. The pen stopped mid-twirl. He knew I was right. Legend of Mir 2 was not a hit in South Korea. Not even close. The company was bleeding cash to keep developers employed on a product the Korean market had already yawned at. He coughed, recovering, and asked what I thought was fair. I held up one finger. $100,000 US. The pen clattered onto the table. Park nearly leapt from his chair, face red, palm slamming the conference table. He spat something in rapid Korean that Kim Mi-yeon softened into. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. This is an insult. I did not move. I sat there with one finger still in the air and let him burn through his outrage like a man throwing punches at smoke. When he was done, I said quietly, 100,000 is not small for agency rights to a single regional market. He countered at 900,000, called it his lowest price. We had gone from $1 million to 900,000 in under 2 minutes. The walls were crumbling, but I was not there to buy agency rights. I leaned forward, just slightly. Manager Park, let us stop circling each other. I can offer 900,000, but what I want is not a license. A pause. I want to buy your subsidiary, Wemade, the entire company, all copyrights to Legend of Mir 2, every line of source code, every developer, every asset. Kim Mi-yeon's eyebrows lifted a fraction of a millimeter as she translated. Park stared at me. The smug confidence was gone. In its place, confusion, suspicion, and underneath both, the faintest flicker of greed. I pressed before he could think. Actos founded Wemade with 700 million won, less than 4 million yuan. The company is 6 months old. I am offering over 7 million yuan. You double your money in half a year. You know what that return means. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked the obvious question. Why buy the whole company when distribution rights would suffice? I had rehearsed this on the flight over. China's game market is just starting. We lack games, but we lack talent even more. Acquiring Wemade gives me a game and a team in one transaction. Buying time with money, that is all. Reasonable, logical. What I did not say was that I knew every catastrophe that followed if I only bought a license. The jealousy, the lawsuits, the source code leaks, the private servers. My son's thoughts had mapped every landmine, and I was stepping around all of them before they were planted. Park just needed to see a rich Chinese businessman with more money than sense, and that is exactly what he saw. He softened, told me he needed to consult the board. I stood, straightened my suit, and let my voice carry just the right indifference. Take your time, but my patience has limits, and you are not the only game company trying to find a buyer. What he did not understand was that I already knew his answer. Wemade's developers could not make payroll next month. He was not deciding whether to sell. He was deciding how to pretend the price was his idea, In the elevator, alone, I allowed myself one small smile. The pen had stopped twirling. 2 days later, Park called. The conference room was the same, but the ashtray was already full when I arrived. Park looked like he had not slept. The cocky salesman was gone. In his place sat a man doing math he did not like. He opened at 1.5 million, called it his absolute bottom line, said it through clenched teeth like the words were being pulled out with pliers. Over 12 million yuan, still dreaming. I leaned back, picked up a lighter from the table, and turned it slowly between my fingers, the way he had twirled his pen 2 days ago. I let him see me do it. 1 million, I said, not a penny more. What followed was a war of attrition. 2 full hours. Park dropped to 1.4. I held 1.3. I did not move. 1.2. And he planted his flag, insisting it was already a sacrifice, that his board would eat him alive. I stubbed out my cigarette, looked at the ceiling, shifted my tone as if something had just occurred to me. How about this? I add another 100,000, 1.1 million. His eyes lit up. He leaned forward, mouth opening. I raised my hand. However, I have conditions. 400,000 down. The remaining 700,000 paid within 6 months. Park's face darkened. 6 months was too long, he said, and 1.1 was still below expectations. I held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then I stood up. Slowly, deliberately, I straightened my suit collar, picked up my briefcase, turned toward the door. If Manager Park feels this is a loss, I said over my shoulder, then forget it. I do not necessarily have to buy it. I took 1 step, 2, 3, silence. I could feel his eyes on my back. I could feel the calculations, the developers who needed paychecks, the board demanding answers, the Korean market that had already moved on. 4 steps. Mr. Chen, I stopped. I did not turn around. Mr. Chen, wait, please. The steel in his voice was gone. What remained was a man watching a lifeboat sail without him. 1.1 million was acceptable, he said, but the balance within 3 months, not 6. His voice cracked on the word 3. That was his real bottom line, not the number, the timeline. His developers needed to eat. I stood with my back to him. The corners of my mouth twitched upward, once. Then I turned around. My face was pure agony. Furrowed brow, tight lips, the expression of a man being asked to cut off his own hand. I paced in front of the table, 3 steps left, 3 steps right, rubbed my neck, stared at the ceiling. 1 full minute of this performance. Kim Mi-yeon watched with her hands folded. Something in her eyes told me she knew exactly what I was doing. She said nothing. Finally, a long, heavy sigh. Fine. 3 months. Deal. Park grabbed my hand like a drowning man grabs rope. 1.1 million. 400,000 down. 700,000 in 90 days. The source code, the team, the future. In the original timeline, Chen Tianqiao would pay 300,000 for just the license, and that single game would make him the richest man in China. But the Koreans would get jealous. The lawsuits would fly, the code would leak, and the golden goose would choke on its own feathers. I had just paid less than 4 times that for the entire goose. The farm, the land, every egg it would ever lay. The contracts were drafted. 400,000 left my foreign exchange account. I watched the wire confirmation and felt a weight lift that I had been carrying since my son's thoughts first whispered the name Wemade. Before flying home, I walked into Wemade's office. Cramped floor, instant noodle smell, 15 developers hunched over monitors. I selected a core technical team and told them through Kim Mi-yeon they were coming to China. New apartments, better pay, a billion-person market waiting for their game. One of them laughed, thinking it was a joke. None refused. I housed them in the empty Pudong apartments I had bought for 3,200 a square meter. Real estate already paying for itself in ways I had not planned. The morning after I landed, I called a meeting. 9 o'clock. Lin Wan flew in from Beijing overnight, still travel-worn. Zhao Kai in his usual wrinkled polo. Su Qing in a beige silk blouse and black skirt, posture straight enough to balance a coin on her shoulder. I tapped the table. During my trip to South Korea, I said, I casually acquired a game company. The silence was one of the most satisfying sounds I had ever heard. Su Qing's lips parted. Lin Wan's hand froze mid-air. Zhao Kai blinked 3 times. I told them I was bringing Legend of Mir 2 to China under a new entity, Legendary Games Company, Limited. Our strategic focus was shifting from internet cafes to gaming. Su Qing would run the new company as general manager. Storm Network Management would fold in as the distribution channel. Zhao Kai would bridge the Korean and Chinese technical teams. Lin Wan would secure servers and infrastructure. Su Qing's voice trembled. She asked if I was sure she could do this. If I say you can, I said. Then you can. Her eyes went wet, but her jaw was set. That was the look of someone who had been waiting for exactly this door. After the meeting, I drove home and sat on the sofa. Xiao Tian was on the floor, surrounded by toy cars, humming off key. I mentioned, casually, that I had bought a game company in Korea. His toy car hit the carpet, mid-hum. His thoughts crashed into me. He was stunned, genuinely stunned. He had expected me to negotiate agency rights, push the price to 300,000. Instead, I had bought the whole company, source code, developers, everything. His mind raced. No jealous Koreans, no lawsuits, no leaked code, no private servers, total control. The exact solution from his Saturday chocolate-stained magazine session. Then came the thought that tightened my chest. He thought, Dad has got guts. He is definitely going to be a big shot someday. Not a child admiring his father. A man trapped in a child's body who had seen the future and watched his father rewrite it. I looked at my son licking chocolate off his thumb and felt something warm bloom behind my ribs. Silly boy, I thought. Your father is standing on the shoulders of giants. The giant just happens to be 4 feet tall and covered in chocolate. I ruffled his hair, said nothing. His next thought came fast. He was thinking about a penguin, Tencent, OICQ, a chat program burning cash with no revenue model, a company that, in the original timeline, almost went bankrupt and sold itself for a fraction of its eventual worth. He thought, is the penguin empire on the verge of bankruptcy? The familiar cold clarity settled over me. One acquisition was done. The snake had swallowed its elephant, but there was a bigger elephant out there, one shaped like a penguin. I closed my eyes. Somewhere in Shenzhen, a company with a cartoon mascot was running out of money. 3 months to pay off the Wemade balance. Then the cash flow from Legend of Mir would be a flood, and then the real shopping would begin. The ink on the Wemade contracts was barely dry, and I was already thinking about penguins. Over the next 3 weeks, the machine moved fast. Su Qing locked down office space in Pudong and hung the sign for Legendary Games Company. The Korean developers settled into my empty apartments and started localization alongside a dozen Chinese programmers Zhao Kai recruited. Lin Wan pulled strings from her old electronics factory days and secured servers at a price that made me blink twice. Every yuan from the internet cafe chain flowed into this operation. I froze Storm expansion in other cities. No new locations. Every penny pointed at one target. The clock was ticking. 3 months to pay Park the remaining $700,000. If Legend of Mir did not generate cash, that deal would strangle me. By late October, the game was ready. November 1st, open beta. I approved 3 million yuan for the marketing blitz and called a war council. Su Qing and Lin Wan sat across from me. Lin Wan proposed carpet-bombing portal websites. Sound logic. Su Qing leaned forward with a different idea. OICQ, she said. The Penguin Chat program. Millions of young users. Nearly perfect overlap with our gamers. She suggested we contact Tencent about placing ads directly in the software. The word penguin hit me like a bell. Not just an advertising channel, a bridge, a foot in the door for when I was ready to talk investment. I told Su Qing to get that ad space at any cost. Within days, warrior and mage posters covered internet cafe walls across East China. Sina and Sohu splashed our ads on their homepages. But the penguin had a problem. Su Qing came back looking deflated. Tencent's business team was interested in the money, of course. The company was broke, but they said the OICQ interface was too simple. Just a friend list and a chat box. No room for ads. They needed time to discuss it. That weekend, Xiao Tian wandered out of his room eating an apple. He asked about the game, mentioned the ads were everywhere, then asked one casual question. Why were there no ads on OICQ? Everyone was using it. I shrugged, said they turned us down. Interface too small. His thoughts detonated. He was thinking about how primitive OICQ was. A few hundred kilobytes. A tiny clean interface with no spare pixels. He thought Ma Huateng had not yet evolved into the business genius he would become. Then my son thought the words that changed everything. If there is no space on the interface, just make it pop up. Pop-up ad in the bottom right corner. This was later Tencent's nuclear weapon. It did not take up screen space, yet it forced a reminder, making it impossible to ignore. Extremely low tech. 2 lines of code, pop-up ads. The concept landed in my skull like a hammer. I kept my face blank, but inside, every nerve was firing. In the year 2000, no software did this. Nobody had thought of it. The idea was so simple, it was almost rude. A small window appearing in the system tray when a user logged in, visible for a few seconds, vanishing when clicked. No interface space required. Total forced visibility. I sent my son to watch television, walked to the balcony, and looked out at the Huangpu River. Little Ma, I thought. I am about to hand you the revenue model that saves your company, and you are going to give me the distribution channel that launches mine. Monday morning, I picked up the landline myself and dialed Tencent. The voice that answered was tired, gentle, with a southern accent. I introduced myself. A pause, then warmth. He said he was Ma Huateng. I had dialed straight into the founder. A company that small, the boss probably answered every call. I asked about the interface problem. He confirmed it. Apologetic. They had discussed it for days. Too cramped. Awkward. I interrupted gently. If the interface is the problem, I said, I have a suggestion. Since the ad cannot fit inside the interface, put it outside. When a user logs in, a small pop-up window appears automatically in the lower right corner of the screen via the system tray. Displays for a few seconds. Disappears when the user clicks to close it. No space taken on the main interface, yet extremely eye-catching. We call this a pop-up ad. Dead silence on the line. Then rapid breathing. He was muttering to himself. Pop-up window. Floating window. He had a technical background. The logic clicked instantly. Not difficult to build, but in this era of conservative software design, nobody thought outside the box like that. His voice came back full of undisguised excitement. Brilliant, he called it. Entirely feasible. Simple to implement. I smiled at the ceiling, then asked the question that mattered. So, Mr. Ma, our cooperation? He did not hesitate. Cooperation, absolutely. Tencent would fully support Legend of Mir's promotion. 1 week later, Ma Huateng called back. His team had built the pop-up feature and rolled it into a new OICQ version. To express gratitude, he offered 1 month of free pop-up advertising, 3 Legend of Mir ads pushed to every user, every day, and a permanent 50% discount on all future placements. Free. 1 month. Tens of millions of eyeballs. I had just handed Tencent the revenue model that would eventually make it one of the most valuable companies on Earth. In return, I got the most powerful advertising weapon in China for nothing. The Penguin owed me a favor. When the time came to discuss equity, that favor would be my boarding pass. November 1st, 7:30 in the evening. I stood in front of the monitoring screen at headquarters, cigarette between my fingers. I had gambled everything on this moment. Servers humming. $3 million in marketing spent. $700,000 hanging over me like a blade. If the game flopped, I lost the Wemade deal, the Tencent connection, everything I had built in 6 months. 8 o'clock, servers live. 10 minutes, 10,000 players online. 30 minutes, 30,000. By 9 o'clock, Suqing turned to me sweating, hair disheveled. 40,000 and climbing. Server 1 overloading. I barked orders, all backup servers online. Open zones 2 and 3. Linwan had prepared capacity for 50,000 concurrent. I had thought that was generous. By 9:40, all zones full. 50,000 online. Tens of thousands queuing. The customer service line overwhelmed. Linwan walked in from one of our storm cafes, still carrying the November chill. Every seat taken, she said. People standing in the aisles watching over players' shoulders. She reminded me about rental servers from her hardware contacts. Could not ship new machines for 2 days, but could rent existing racks by morning. I told her to rent capacity for 100,000. She raised an eyebrow. I said, this is just the beginning. Day 2, 80,000 concurrent at evening peak. Weekend, 100,000. I announced the number to the media. The industry was stunned. 2 weeks later, 300,000. The game swallowed the internet cafe landscape whole. Every screen glowed with warriors and mages and Taoist priests. Kids stood behind occupied chairs for hours, watching strangers kill bosses. But free players were one thing, paying players were another, and the 3-month deadline had not stopped ticking. Suqing brought me the crisis before I had to ask. She pinned a map to the wall and pointed at the blank spots. Our distribution covered East China, South China, North China, coastal cities, but back-end data showed active players from Central China, the Northeast, the Northwest, the Southwest, provincial capitals, even small cities, places where point card distribution was zero. Once charging started, those players would evaporate. I stared at all that white space on the map, all that money about to vanish. I told Suqing to recruit aggressively, temporary workers, anyone willing. Plant our flag in every city with an internet cafe. Focus on provincial capitals first. She scattered over 100 new hires across the inland like seeds, hand-picked veterans as regional managers, and sent them into the blank spaces. I set the pricing. 3 tiers. A 10 yuan trial card with 20 hours. A 35 yuan standard card with 120 hours. A 50 yuan monthly pass. Unlimited play. Something for every wallet. December 1st, the free beta ended. Paid model live at 8 in the evening. I did not go home. Takeout at the office. Suqing, Lin Wan, Zhao Kai, everyone there. Palms sweating. 7:50, server down for maintenance. Billing module imported. 8 o'clock sharp. Reopened. Every login now prompted a point deduction confirmation. The moment of truth. 3 minutes. 10,000 paying users. 5 minutes. 30,000. I watched the curve climb and felt the knot in my chest loosen one thread at a time. 15 minutes. 100,000. A suppressed cheer rippled through the office. 30 minutes, 200,000. Suqing's voice was trembling. Most players were choosing the 35 yen standard card or the 50 yuan monthly pass. The cheap trial cards barely moved. These players were committed. By 10 o'clock, the curve leveled. 360,000 paying users. Simultaneously, half of the free beta peak, but every single one had opened their wallets. I stood up, looked around at the exhausted electric faces, kept my voice quiet. We made it, I said. The cheers blew the roof off. Suqing's ground teams kept pushing inland. Every day, another provincial capital lit up. Players who had left during the switch to paid service came flooding back. 1 week after charging began, Lao Wu walked into my office carrying a report. His hands were shaking, not from nerves, from disbelief. Total prepaid card sales, first week, 11.9 million yuan. After channel commissions, actual revenue was 10.06 million, 10 million yuan in 1 week. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and took a long breath. The $700,000 I owed Park Chang-min was roughly 5.8 million yuan at the current exchange rate. I had just made nearly double that in 7 days. The debt that had pressed on my chest like a stone since Seoul was pocket change now. The snake had not just swallowed the elephant, it had digested it. I opened my eyes, told Lao Wu to go to the bank immediately, convert the funds, wire 700,000 American dollars to Octos, settle the balance in full, do it today. He left without a word. There was still more than a month before the deadline, but I did not want that number hanging over me for another second. Let Park think he made a good deal. He would never know he sold a money printing machine for a fraction of what it was worth. 500,000 concurrent within 2 weeks of charging. First full month of paid operation, December, alone. 22 million yuan in net profit. I sat in my office, looking out at the Bund. The Huangpu River was gray under winter clouds, barges crawling slow and heavy. Somewhere in Shenzhen, a company with a cartoon penguin mascot was still scraping by on the pop-up ad revenue I had given them, still searching for a real business model, still answering their own phones. The timid starve, I thought, the bold feast, and the feast was just getting started. I flew to Shenzhen 2 days later, alone. No Suqing, no Lao Wu, no entourage. Some deals require a small room and a steady voice, nothing more. Ma Huateng picked up on the first ring. His voice had that slightly breathless quality I remembered from our phone calls, half eagerness, half nerves. I told him I had just landed, asked if I could visit the office. There was a pause. He said of course, but warned me the conditions were basic. I told him every empire starts in a garage and to send me the address. Seg Technology Park, Huaqiang Bay, 4th floor of the most dilapidated building in the complex. His words, not mine. I found the place by following the smell of burnt solder and boxed lunches. The stairwell was wallpapered with ads for counterfeit document services. Electrical cables hung from the ceiling like jungle vines. I stopped in front of a narrow door with a small sign that read, Tencent Computer Systems Co. Zuo, Limited. No receptionist, no lobby. I knocked twice and pushed it open. 30 square meters, maybe 40. Desks crammed together, buried under computer parts, instant noodle cups, and stacks of reference books. 4 or 5 engineers hunched over keyboards, too focused to notice a stranger walking in. The fluorescent lighting hummed, and one tube flickered near the window. This was the company with tens of millions of registered users. This was the future. Ma Huateng looked up from behind a monitor. Gold-rimmed glasses, wrinkled plaid shirt. He scrambled to his feet and crossed the room in 3 quick strides, hand extended, smile wide, but slightly embarrassed. He introduced me around. Zhang Zhidong, the tech lead, a heavyset kid who immediately fetched water in a paper cup. Zheng Liqing, marketing. Chen Yidan, Shu Chenye. 5 founders crammed into a space smaller than one of my internet cafe back offices. Zhang Zhidong set the water in front of me and could not help himself. He said that without the pop-up ad revenue I had given them, they probably would not have made rent on the server room this month. Ma Huateng nodded, called it a lifeline, said the company's accounts had gained a few 100,000 yuan from the ads, just enough to stay breathing. I sipped the warm water and played dumb. looked around the cramped office, raised an eyebrow, and asked the obvious question. Tens of millions of users, enormous daily traffic, yet the company looked like it was running on fumes. How? That question opened the floodgates. Ma Huateng's face went tight. He spread his hands and told me the truth. OICQ was free software. Every new user meant more server load, more bandwidth cost, a bottomless pit, hundreds of thousands in expenses every single day just to keep the lights on. The dot-com bubble had burst, NASDAQ was in the gutter, and investors were clutching their wallets. He had knocked on every door, Sina, Sohu, NetEase. Everyone said no. IDG, their earliest investor, was not looking to put more money in. IDG was looking to sell their stake and walk away. The $2 million from the last funding round was gone, burned through. Without the pop-up revenue, he did not know how many more weeks they would have lasted. The room went quiet. 5 future billionaires sat in that silence, and not one of them knew it. I set down the paper cup, straightened in my chair, let my voice go calm and direct. I told them I saw something different from everyone else. Traffic was the future of the internet. OICQ held the social graph of tens of millions of people, their relationships, their conversations, their daily habits. That was not a liability. That was a gold mine buried under temporary ice. The winter would end, the users would stay, and whoever owned that network when the thaw came would own the decade. Ma Huateng's eyes changed. That flicker you see when someone who has been told no 50 times in a row finally hears yes. I said it plain. I wanted to invest. Personal capacity. They should focus on the product and the users. I would handle the money. Zhang Zhidong shot to his feet so fast, his chair rolled back into the wall. He asked if I was serious. His voice cracked on the word. Ma Huateng gripped the edge of his desk and tried to keep his composure. He said that if I was willing, it would be like rain after a drought. I told them I never joked about money. Then I asked the real question. How much were they willing to give up? And what did they think the company was worth? The room went awkward. The founders huddled and whispered. IDG held 20%. PCCW Digital held another 20%. Any deal needed their sign-off. Ma Huateng said they would need a few days to coordinate. I told him I was staying in Shenzhen. Take the time. I would wait. 2 days later, Ma Huateng called me back. The atmosphere was different this time. Freshly printed documents on the table. Everyone sitting upright. IDG had no objection to new money coming in. In fact, IDG had hinted they would be happy to sell their existing shares if someone offered. That was the sound of an open door. Ma Huateng asked what I had in mind. I held up 3 fingers. $30 million valuation, I said. $5 million for 15% of the company. The money would arrive within 1 month. The number landed like a grenade, 5 to 6 times the previous round's valuation. In the middle of an internet winter, when no one would return their calls, I was offering them a price that said I believed. Zhang Zhidong blurted out that I was generous. Zheng Liqing looked like she might cry. Ma Huateng took a slow breath and accepted. A $30 million valuation. Deal. I had one condition. First right of refusal on all future funding rounds. If anyone else wanted in, I got to match. Ma Huateng agreed without hesitation. We shook hands. Lawyers came. Contracts were drafted on the spot. I signed, promising $2 million within 3 days, the rest within a month. The founders stared at the ink on the page like men who had been drowning and just felt sand under their feet. But I was not done. I asked Ma Huateng about IDG, casually, over tea, after the contracts were signed. He confirmed what I suspected. IDG had lost all faith in instant messaging. They wanted out. They considered Tencent a hot potato. I asked if he thought they would sell to me. He said if the price was right, they would probably offer a discount. Their 20% at the valuation we had just set was $6 million. I told him I could not swing it immediately, but after the new year, once cash flow stabilized, I would be ready. He agreed to broker the introduction, 15% now, 20% from IDG after the new year, 35% of Tencent, for roughly $11 million total. I sat across from Ma Huateng and clinked glasses at dinner that night, and the only thing I could not do was tell him why. I could not explain that a 10-year-old boy's stray thoughts had shown me what this company would become, that the cartoon penguin would one day be worth more than most countries' GDP, that the shabby 4th floor office would spawn an empire so vast it would reshape how 1 billion people communicated, played, paid, and lived. All I could say was that I believed in traffic, and that was enough. I flew back to Shanghai the next morning and wired $2 million before lunch. 16 million yuan, gone in a single transfer. First phase complete. Everyone around me thought I had lost my mind. Lao Wu ran the numbers 3 times and kept looking at me like I had a fever. Su Qing was diplomatic about it, but I could see the question in her eyes. $5 million for a company that could not pay rent, in the middle of a tech crash, while we had a game printing money and 100 better places to put capital. I could not explain. I just told them to trust me and moved on to the next play because my son's mind had already shifted, and when it shifted, I followed. It started with an MP3 player. Su Qing had given Xiaotian a Rio PMP300 as a gift, a chunky silver rectangle, clumsy to hold, ugly to look at. Most adults saw a gadget. Xiaotian saw an industry. His thoughts hit me in waves. The design was terrible, he complained internally. Gray plastic brick, no style. He imagined a sleek device with rounded edges, multiple colors, red, blue, pink, something a girl could wear around her neck like an accessory. He thought about two product lines, high-end with large storage and premium sound for people with money, low-end focused on affordability for students. Differentiated marketing, straight from the mouth of a child who was not really a child. Then the dangerous details. He thought about Apple's click wheel, a touch-sensitive dial for scrolling through hundreds of songs. He thought about OLED screens. He thought about Toshiba's miniature hard drives. He thought about a future where this MP3 business would generate enough capital to build phones, and phones would be worth hundreds of billions. I kept my face perfectly blank, while my son casually described a product roadmap that would not exist in the real world for years. I needed a hardware engineer. Su Qing asked around, but her contacts were too junior. She suggested I talk to Lin Wan, whose college classmates were a generation older and further along in their careers. Good instinct. Lin Wan adjusted her gold-rimmed glasses and thought for exactly 3 seconds. She knew someone, Zhou Hai, college classmate, tech obsessive, graduate work at the University of Science and Technology of China, then a doctorate, then a stint as technical director at BBK Electronics. BBK was the boot camp of China's electronics industry. Anyone who came through Duan Yangping's operation knew hardware the way a surgeon knows a scalpel. But Zhou Hai had quit, could not stomach corporate politics, went back to teaching at USTC. Lin Wan warned me he was difficult. I told her difficult people were the only ones worth hiring. 2 days later, Lin Wan and I flew to Hefei. We met Zhou Hai in a private room at an Anhui restaurant. Middle-aged, messy hair, gray jacket, drinking tea alone. He looked like the kind of man who thought small talk was a waste of oxygen. I liked him immediately. He was polite but cold, said he had no interest in returning to the corporate world. He had had enough of office politics and KPI nonsense. Teaching was poor but peaceful. I understood. So I skipped the pleasantries and laid out the offer. 300,000 yuan annual salary in an era when a professor made 3,000 a month. Project bonuses on top. 2 million in startup R&D funding. Buy whatever equipment he wanted. Hire whoever he wanted. Answer to no one but me. No politics. No committees. No interference. I cared about results, not process. His hand trembled and wine spilled from his glass. Then, I placed the Rio MP3 player on the table and told him what I actually wanted. Not a knockoff. Not another gray brick following the trend. I wanted a Chinese-made device that could crush this thing and go global. I asked him if that sounded more interesting than grading papers. Zhou Hai picked up the Rio, turned it over, examined it with the instinct of a man who understood circuits the way poets understood rhythm. He said the technology was not complicated. The bottleneck was storage. Then his eyes lit up. He mentioned that Toshiba had recently developed a 1.8-inch micro hard drive. If they could integrate that, it would be a breakthrough. I had not even told him about the micro hard drive. He already knew. I asked if he was willing to board the ship. He nodded. Said he would need 2 weeks to wrap up at the university. Then he would come to Shanghai. We clinked glasses. The deal was done. Back in Shanghai, I registered a new company the next morning. I took one character from my name and one from Xiaotian's. Fengtian Technology. The high-end flagship line would be the F series. F1, F2, F3. Premium build, maximum storage, cutting-edge design. The budget line would be the T series. T1 onward. Colorful, affordable, aimed at students. My son's 2-tier strategy, executed under his own initial without him ever knowing. I called Lin Wan in, told her to find new office space. 2 full floors, big enough to house all 3 companies under one roof. Legend Network for the game, Storm Network Management for the internet cafes. Fengtian Technology for hardware, 3 empires converging in a single tower in Pudong. She asked about buying instead of renting. I shook my head. Not yet. I had just poured millions into Tencent, and the IDG share acquisition was coming after the new year. Fengtian's R&D would burn cash before it made any. Cash flow discipline first. When the MP3 players sold and the penguin hatched, then we would buy land and build something permanent. I stood at the window and looked out at Lujiazui. Construction cranes dotted the skyline like compass needles, pointing in every direction. Somewhere in that forest of steel and concrete, 3 separate futures were taking shape. A game that printed money money, a stake in a company the world did not yet understand, and a hardware lab about to build products that did not yet exist. One man, one secret, 3 empires, and a 10-year-old boy eating an apple on the couch, completely unaware that his idle daydreams were building all of it. The prototypes arrived on a Tuesday. Joe Hai set them on my desk without ceremony. The F1 in pearl white, smaller than a deck of cards. The T1 in sky blue, both with the click wheel my son had dreamed up months ago, though Joe Hai would never know that. I picked up the F1 and turned it in my hand. The weight was right, solid without being heavy. My son's daydream was now a physical object I could hold in my palm. That night, I brought both prototypes home. Xiao Tian was doing homework, tongue poking out the side of his mouth. I set the players beside his math workbook. His pencil stopped. He put on the headphones, listened, scrolled through the menu, ran his thumb along the edges. Then his verdict came, out loud. Pretty cool, much better than the Rio, but the corners were too sharp, the scroll wheel too stiff, and the menu buried songs 3 layers deep when it should have taken 1 tap. I already knew. I had heard every critique unfold in his mind the moment his fingers touched the devices, but I widened my eyes and called him incredibly observant, promised to pass every note to the tech team first thing. He beamed, scooped up both players, and disappeared into his room. 2 days later, the corners were rounded, the wheel damping adjusted, the interface simplified. The products were ready. Now came the part I could not solve alone. Marketing director Zhao Ya delivered her proposal that Friday. It was thorough, logical, and completely forgettable. Local TV stations, newspaper spreads, radio spots. She had followed every playbook in Chinese consumer electronics. Solid execution, zero imagination. Something was missing. Not a detail, but a frequency. The plan hummed at the wrong pitch. Too careful, too safe. Our products were grenades thrown into a market that did not know it was about to change. I could not articulate what was missing. I only knew who could. That evening, I set Zhao Ya's proposal on the coffee table, right in the center, angled toward the couch, on the cover, stamped in red ink, top secret. Then, I walked into my bedroom, changed my shirt slowly, and left the door cracked, 2 inches, just enough to see through the gap. I waited. The front door opened at 4:37. School bag hit the floor. Shoes kicked off. Refrigerator opened and closed. Footsteps padded toward the couch. Silence. Through the crack, I could see him, my son, standing over the coffee table with a juice box in one hand, staring at those red characters like they were written in gold. He glanced left, glanced right. Then he sat down and opened the folder. His thoughts hit me like a broadcast signal locking on. The plan was solid, he admitted. Professional, but way too conservative. Local stations and newspaper ads for a product this good? That was a slingshot at a war. Dad was building flagship stores in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen. These were national products. The strategy needed to match. CCTV, that was the answer. Prime time. The golden slots that reached every household in the country. In 2001, getting on CCTV was not just advertising. It was a coronation. His inner voice picked up speed, thoughts tumbling now. Forget spreading budget across 20 local channels. Concentrate the firepower. One CCTV campaign. Establish the brand nationally in one strike. The flagship stores would fill themselves, but that was not all. The plan was missing something bigger, a sound, a signature. He thought about BBK's music phone, the jingle etched into the public brain like a scar. They needed their own version, something ethereal, something that would crawl into people's ears and refuse to leave. And then the thought I had been waiting for, without knowing I was waiting for it. He remembered a melody, from wherever those memories came from. A simple female vocal, no lyrics, just humming. Da-leng, da-leng, da-leng. Every note, every breath between the notes. The kind of tune that sounded like nothing the first time, and like everything the second. 2 versions of the commercial, his mind continued. One for students, a girl in a Japanese-style pleated skirt and white shirt, walking a tree-lined campus path, not frumpy mainland uniforms, something clean and aspirational. One for professionals, a polished woman in business attire striding through glass towers. 2 demographics, 1 song, total coverage, and every unit preloaded with the melody as the demo track. Brand imprinting, he called it. I leaned against the doorframe. My hand was over my mouth, not to stay quiet, to hide the grin. This was not the brain of a 10-year-old. This was a top-tier marketing master sitting on my couch in dinosaur pajamas, reading classified documents while drinking apple juice. Good lad, you have helped your dad a lot again this time. I pushed the door open. He flinched, slapped the folder shut, stammered about not recognizing the words. Company documents? Very confusing. I ruffled his hair. Feel free to look around. I said. His shoulders dropped with relief. He had no idea that the secret he thought he discovered was placed there for him, that the father rubbing his head had been standing behind a cracked door for 20 minutes, harvesting a complete marketing strategy from a child's silent thoughts. Was I a genius parent, or was I exploiting my own son? I did not have a clean answer. I still do not. All I knew was that the next morning, I walked into Zhao Ya's office and presented the revised plan as if it came to me overnight. CCTV primetime, dual commercials, campus and corporate, a signature melody. She called the concept genius. I said nothing about the genius being 10 years old and currently late for school. A few days later, I came home and heard something new. A melody drifting from Xiaotian's room. A female voice, humming, no words, just sound, rising and falling like breath over water. Da-leng, da-leng, da-leng. My lips pulled sideways before I could stop them. The little engineer had moved fast. He had gone to a music academy, found a vocal student, paid her a few hundred yuan to record the tune. A primary schooler with cash and a melody in his head, walking into a conservatory and walking out with a finished recording. Then bringing it home on the F1 prototype, playing it through the speaker like a fisherman dangling bait. I knocked on his door, put surprise in my voice, asked what he was listening to. He held up the F1, trying to look casual. A smug satisfaction leaked through his expression, the kind a boy wears when his plan is working exactly as designed. An online friend wrote it, he said. Sent it for feedback. He thought it sounded clean. I stroked my chin, told him the melody was simple but incredibly catchy. Then I asked, casually, if his friend would sell the copyright. Our company needed a jingle. This song was perfect. His eyes went still for 1 second. Inside his mind, astonishment. Dad's instincts were amazing. He had not even needed hints this time. Dad just took the bait by himself. Bait. He thought I took his bait. I thought he took mine. Two fishermen casting lines at each other across the same kitchen table, each believing the other was the fish. He messaged his friend on QQ. Half an hour later, he ran back with the answer, 10,000 yuan. I raised an eyebrow. That cheap? 10,000 yuan. The song that would blanket every television in China, hummed by strangers on subways, stuck in the heads of millions, cost less than dinner at a decent restaurant. The deal was done, but Xiaoqian pushed further. Now that they had the jingle, he asked, had I figured out the commercial? This was his moment. He was about to unveil the dual version concept, the Japanese school uniform idea. He had rehearsed it in his head, but I had heard the rehearsal days ago, standing behind a cracked door. I sat up straight and delivered his entire plan back to him, as if it were mine. Two versions. A girl in a pleated skirt for the student ad, a career woman in business attire for the professional version. Both scored with the melody. His thoughts stuttered. How was this exactly what he had imagined? Was this the legendary father-son bond? Had Dad actually evolved into a marketing master? Dad even thought of the Japanese school uniform detail. Impressive. I watched confusion cycle into admiration and then into something like awe. My son, staring at me as if I were a genius, when every word I had spoken was stolen from inside his head. Kid, I thought, you will have plenty of these moments. The song was acquired. The strategy was locked. Every piece placed by a 10-year-old boy who thought he was secretly guiding his father, and a father who knew the boy's every thought before it finished forming. Two people who loved each other completely. Two people deceiving each other constantly. The strangest, warmest con game in the history of Chinese business. And neither of us would have had it any other way. The ads launched on a Tuesday evening, 8:47, right after the national news. 50 million households tuned in, give or take, and between the brain gold screaming and the detergent jingles and the herbal supplement testimonials, something different slipped through. A girl in a pleated skirt, white shirt, headphones in, walking a tree-lined campus path where the light came through the leaves in coins of gold. She was not selling anything. She was just listening, eyes half closed, the corner of her mouth turned up like she had a secret the rest of the world had not earned yet. And underneath it all, that melody. Da-leng, da-leng, da-leng. No shouting, no flashing prices, no celebrity endorsement, just a girl and a song and a small white rectangle that fit in her palm like it belonged there. The second version aired 11 minutes later. Same melody, different world. A woman in a charcoal blazer, heels clicking through a canyon of glass towers. The T1 in brushed silver, tucked against her hip. She walked like she owned the skyline. The camera never rushed. The song never hurried. In an era where every commercial screamed, ours whispered, and the whisper spread. By midnight, the melody was stuck in the heads of people who could not remember what product it belonged to. By morning, they remembered. By the next evening, teenagers were humming it in school corridors. Office workers tapped the rhythm on their desks without realizing. A high school girl in Hangzhou apparently pointed at the screen mid-dinner and begged her father for one. He bought it that weekend. The forums lit up overnight. Posts about the campus girl, posts about the melody, posts asking where to buy. Our QQ pop-up campaign fired at the same time. Banners across every major portal. The internet and the television hit from both sides like a pincer. March 28th, launch day. Lin Wan walked into my office that morning with a folder pressed against her chest and a look on her face I had never seen before. She was trying to be professional. She was failing. 4,013 units. Day 1, 10 flagship stores, 471 F1s, 1,602 T1 128s, 1,940 T1 256s. Total revenue, 5,960,000 yuan in one day. I stared at the number, red ink on white paper. I read it twice, then a third time. The figure did not change. 5.96 million. From a product that existed as a sketch on my son's homework desk 8 months ago. From a melody a 10-year-old had paid a few hundred yuan to record. From a marketing strategy I had stolen from behind a cracked bedroom door. Lin Wan was still talking. Shanghai led, then Shenzhen, Beijing, Guangzhou. F1 dominated first-tier cities. T1 carried the volume in the second tier. I heard all of it and processed none of it. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. Inside, something was roaring. I told her to increase production on the 256 T1 immediately. No stockouts. Then press the advantage online. Forum posts, influencer seeding, the works. Make the fire burn hotter. She left. The door clicked shut. I sat in that office and let the number sink through my skin. 5.96 million one day. And this was just the opening weekend. The trajectory would flatten, sure, but the brand was planted. The melody was in their heads. Fengtian technology existed now in a way it had not existed 48 hours ago. 3 empires. A gaming company printing 39 million a month. A chain of internet cafes feeding quarters into the machine. And now, a consumer electronics brand that had just announced itself to the entire country with a whisper and a song. All from a man who, in another life, never made it past 39. The thought arrived without warning. It always did. I locked my office door, sat back in the chair, stared at the ceiling. The revenue reports could wait. The production calls could wait. For once, everything could wait. It was quiet. Just me and the hum of the building and the fading daylight through the window. Shanghai at dusk. The city turning gold, then amber, then gray. I thought about a hospital bed. Not this building, not this view. A different room. Fluorescent lights. The smell of disinfectant that never quite covered the smell underneath. A body that stopped obeying somewhere around 37. Legs first, then the hands, then the voice toward the end. Staring at a ceiling not so different from this one, except that ceiling was the last thing I would ever see. That was supposed to be my life, the whole thing, start to finish. A bed, a window I could not reach, visitors who came less and less, and then nothing. I closed my eyes. The noodles. Lin Meifeng's noodles on that first night back. Steam rising from the bowl. The smell of green onion and sesame oil. She had not asked where I had been or why I looked like a man seeing the world for the first time. She just set the bowl down and said, eat. The sound of heels. Su Yun's heels on tile. Walking out the door with a suitcase and a man waiting in a black sedan. She did not look back. I remember that specifically. Not once. The click, click, click getting quieter until it became silence. And the silence became the rest of my life. Except it did not. Because 3 days later, a small voice drifted through a bedroom wall and everything changed. The boy, sitting on the carpet in dinosaur pajamas, reading classified documents with a juice box, delivering a complete CCTV strategy from the depths of a mind that had lived an entire other lifetime, paying a music student a few hundred yuan, and walking out of a conservatory with a melody that was now stuck in 50 million heads. He never asked for credit, never asked for money beyond the 10,000 yuan, never asked why his father kept arriving at the same conclusions he had. He just kept giving, kept thinking, kept solving problems his father brought home like a cat dropping mice on the doorstep, except in reverse. The hospital bed, the corner office, a body that could not move, hands that had just signed a production order worth millions. I held both images in my mind at the same time. The paralyzed man and the man in the chair. Same person, same name. The only difference was a door cracked 2 inches and a boy who thought too loudly. The building was quiet now. Most of the staff had gone home. Through the wall, I could hear the cleaning crew running a vacuum somewhere on the floor below. Ordinary sounds. The kind you never notice until the day you realize you almost never heard them at all. I drove home late that night. Xiao Tian was already in bed. The apartment was dark, except for the light under his door. I stood in the hallway, did not turn on the lamp, just stood there with my coat still on and my keys in my hand. Through the thin wall, his thoughts drifted in, soft, half asleep. Dad's business instincts are incredible. He didn't even need my hints this time. The MP3 launch went exactly like I imagined. Maybe Dad really has evolved. Maybe he doesn't need me guiding things from the shadows anymore. A pause. No, he still needs me. I'll keep watching, keep nudging. He's my dad. That's what sons do. I leaned against the doorframe. The boy who gave me everything. The boy who thought he was the one guiding me. The boy who would never know that every strategy he whispered into the dark had been heard, harvested, and built into an empire that now stretched across 3 industries and 5 cities. He would never know, and I would never tell him. Not because I was ashamed, not because I was afraid, because telling him would break the only thing that mattered more than any of it. The way he looked at me across the dinner table, the pride in his voice when he thought about his father, the belief, genuine, unshakable, that Chen Feng had transformed himself through sheer will and brilliance. That belief was worth more than Fengtian, more than Legend of Mir, more than every courtyard house in Beijing. Was the silence love, or was it the longest, quietest betrayal a father could commit? I did not have the answer. Standing in that dark hallway, keys still in my hand, I understood that I would never have the answer, that I would carry this question in the same body that once could not carry itself out of a hospital bed, that it would sit beside every triumph, every revenue report, every new acquisition, asking the same thing in the same small voice. Is this what a good father does? From behind the door, one last thought, barely a murmur, already sinking into sleep. Good night, Dad. Tomorrow's going to be another good day. The corner of my mouth turned up. Just the corner. I reached out and touched the door with 2 fingers. Didn't knock, didn't open it, just touched the wood, the way you touch something you're afraid might disappear. Good lad, I whispered. You've helped your dad a lot again. The hallway was dark. The apartment was quiet. Somewhere below, Shanghai hummed a melody that had started in a 10-year-old's head, passed through a conservatory student's voice, traveled through a cracked bedroom door, climbed onto 50 million television screens, and ended here, in the silence between a father and a sleeping son. I stayed against that doorframe for a long time. April's numbers came in on a Wednesday. Su Qing stood across from my desk with the consolidated report, and for once, she did not ease into it. She just read, Legend of Mir, 92 million yuan, peak concurrent, 1.92 million players, ground promotion now covering 95% of county-level cities. Fengtian technology, over 17 million in its second full month. Combined April revenue, north of 100 million yuan, 100 million in a single month. I gave her a small nod. Then, I told her to draft a company-wide notice. Base salary for all frontline staff, increased 25% effective immediately. Every ground promotion rep who had spent 6 months sleeping in train stations and sweet-talking internet cafe owners in 4th-tier cities deserved to eat better. The company was printing money. The people who built the machine should feel it. Her eyes went bright. She thanked me on behalf of the team and left. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Pudong stretched out below, cranes and scaffolding and half-finished towers stabbing upward through the haze. 3 years ago, I had stood in a dim apartment that smelled like Dakianmen cigarettes, holding a severance envelope with 20,000 yuan inside. The paint was peeling. A woman in high heels walked out the door without looking back, and I sat on a couch wondering if that 20,000 was enough to feed my son through the winter. Now, I was looking at a skyline I partially owned. 3 companies, 100 million in a month. The distance between those 2 men was not 3 years. It was a cracked bedroom door and a boy who thought too loudly. I sat down and called Su Qing back. Legend's accounts had over 90 million in cash sitting idle. Fengtian's revenue needed to stay in the business. 40 new stores to build out. But the Legend money could move. I had been thinking about real estate. Shanghai prices were climbing every quarter. More importantly, I had once promised Xiao Tian, half joking over dinner, that when I made real money, I would buy him a building on the Bund. Time to keep that promise. I told Su Qing to clear her Saturday. We were going house shopping. She should pick one out for herself while we were at it. One for Lin Wan too. Those 2 had been with me since the beginning. A house each was the least I owed them. She tried to refuse. I did not let her. Saturday morning, Mercedes to Su Qing's place, then the Bund. She was not in her usual suit. Beige trench coat, jeans, canvas shoes. Younger, less armor. The sales center for magnificent mansion sat on the Huangpu River like a promise. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, an enormous architectural model under soft light. A saleswoman walked up the moment we entered. I found the row of towers closest to the river, pointed to the tallest one, the centerpiece, facing the Oriental Pearl Tower, dead on. She started explaining floor plans, river views, premium finishes. I was half listening, doing a rough math in my head. Then a voice cut through the lobby like a nail on glass. my ex-wife's voice. The pitch was the same. The contempt was the same. She stood 20 feet away, draped in gold jewelry and a man's arm. A fat, middle-aged man in an expensive suit that did not fit him well. Fatty Lou, the bald building materials boss she had left me for. Su Yun looked me up and down. Then, her eyes slid to Su Qing, and something flickered there. Jealousy, quick and ugly. Before she buried it under a smirk, she asked, loud enough for the whole lobby to hear, what a laid-off worker was doing in a luxury showroom, whether my meager severance was enough to support such a pretty young companion, whether we were just here for the free air conditioning. Su Qing's face went cold. She took a step forward. I stopped her with a hand. I looked at Su Yun, not with anger, not with satisfaction, not with anything really. The way you look at a street sign you drove past 3 years ago and no longer need to read. Su Yun, we have nothing to do with each other anymore. Please have some self-respect. One sentence. The way you state a fact. Then I turned back to the saleswoman as if the interruption had been a draft from an open window. Behind me, Su Yun sputtered. Fatty Lou's voice joined in, loud, nasal, calling me a poor bastard, telling the saleswoman to stop wasting time on freeloaders and come serve a real buyer. He wanted a large apartment, cash. He said the words full payment, like he was stamping them onto the air with a seal. I ignored all of it, pointed to the centerpiece building on the model. How many units are left in this building? She hesitated, answered carefully. It was the most expensive tower in the development, not officially on sale yet. The entire building was empty. The whole building is empty? I nodded. Good, give me a total price. The saleswoman's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I said I want the whole building. My voice was not loud, but in the silence that followed, it carried to every corner of that marble lobby. The entire showroom held its breath. Then Su Yun laughed. Shrill, theatrical, too loud. She asked if I had gone insane. A whole building? Did I have any idea what it cost? I would not be worth a fraction of it even if they sold me for parts. Fatty Lou recovered next. His face twisted into something between amusement and disgust. He said what everyone was probably thinking. If I could actually afford it, he would eat the model. I did not look at either of them. I looked at the saleswoman, who was still frozen. You're not selling the whole building? That unlocked her. Her voice cracked. Sell. Yes, of course. Absolutely. Please, sir. This way. Have some tea. She would get the manager. Her hands were shaking. She poured me Da Hong Pao tea with trembling fingers and sprinted to the back office. The sales manager appeared in under 4 minutes. Surname Zhao. Suit, calculator, a bow. He rattled off the numbers. 5,800 yuan per square meter. Standard price. 10% group discount for a whole building purchase. 5,040 per square meter. 40 floors, 3 units per floor. Total area, 15,320 square meters. He turned the calculator toward me. 77,212,800 yuan. Let's round down. 5,000 even. 76,600,000. If that worked, I would swipe my card now. Manager Zhao agreed in under 5 seconds. Threw in 10 years of property fees and a full interior design package. Deal, I said. The lobby erupted. Gasps, whispers, chairs scraping, necks craning. 76.6 million yuan. Cash, without blinking. I turned to Su Qing, told her to pick whatever she liked for herself and for Lin Wan. Do not worry about saving me money. She smiled, a real one. Then followed another agent to the far side of the model. Across the lobby, the air had changed. I could feel it without looking. Fatty Lou was sweating. The arrogance had evaporated off him like water on a hot pan. A man who buys a building for 76 million in cash does not argue with you. He does not notice you. And if you have spent the last 5 minutes calling that man a poor bastard in a crowded showroom, you begin to understand how small you actually are. For a tycoon of that caliber, crushing someone like Lou was as easy as stepping on an insect. He knew it. The knowledge was all over his face. Su Yun's lips were trembling. I knew this without looking at her. You spend enough years married to someone, and you learn their frequencies, the pitch of their breathing when they panic, the shade of pale their skin turns when the ground drops out. She was doing all of it. She whispered something to Lou, asked him if it was real, if her ex-husband, the laid-off worker, the poor bastard, had actually just bought an entire building for more money than she could visualize. Lou did not answer. His certainty that I was faking had dissolved the moment I said the word deal. I did not look at her, not because I was being strategic, not because I was savoring anything. I did not look at her because there was genuinely nothing there to see. Su Yun was a woman I had been married to in a life that no longer existed. The man she had left, the one on the couch with the Dakyanman smoke and the 20,000 yuan envelope and the clicking heels fading down the hallway. That man was dead. He had died the morning a 7-year-old's thoughts poured into his skull and rewrote everything. The man sitting here drinking Da Hong Pao tea in a luxury showroom was someone she had never met. She stood there in that lobby with her gold jewelry and her fat husband and her shrill laugh gone silent. And somewhere behind her eyes, a thought was forming. I knew the shape of it even without hearing it, because it was the most predictable thought in the world. If she had not left, if she had not chased the gold bracelet and the black sedan, if she had stayed even one more year, even 6 more months, she would be the woman standing beside the man who just bought a building. But she did leave. Clack, 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 and the door shut. And the rest of the story happened without her. I signed the paperwork, swiped the card. 76,600,000 yuan. The machine processed it in 8 seconds. I stood up, shook Manager Zhao's hand, and walked out of that showroom with Su Qing beside me. The Saturday sun hit the Huangpu River and turned it into a sheet of hammered bronze. I did not look back. 3 years ago, a woman looked at a man holding 20,000 yuan and saw nothing worth staying for. Today, that man spent 76.6 million without raising his voice. The math was simple. The distance was not. But I was done measuring it. The Boeing touched down at JFK on a Tuesday afternoon, and when I stepped off the jet bridge into the arrivals hall, America hit me like a wall of noise. Loudspeakers in English. Crowds taller than anyone back home. The smell of burnt coffee and floor wax. A blonde woman named Emily held a sign that read Chen in block letters, and beside her stood a bodyguard built like a steel beam. She shook my hand, smiled a professional smile, and ushered me into a black SUV that slid into Manhattan traffic like a fish entering a river. I pressed my forehead against the window and watched New York scroll past. Glass towers, yellow cabs, steam curling from subway grates. 8 months ago, I was sitting on a cracked sofa in a tube-shaped apartment in Linjiang, staring at a severance envelope. Now, I was riding through Midtown toward a meeting that would put Chinese hardware on American shelves. The distance between those two images was not measured in miles. It was measured in one boy's thoughts. IDG's senior vice president, William, met me the next afternoon in a corner office 40 floors above 5th Avenue. He set our F1 and T1 players on the conference table like museum pieces and told me they were, in his words, 2 amazing masterpieces. I thanked him. I did not tell him that every design choice, the touch wheel, the brushed aluminum, the weight distribution, came from a 7-year-old's idle daydream about what Apple would build 5 years from now. William had already arranged the Walmart meeting. The next morning, I sat across from their regional vice president in a glass-walled conference room and negotiated for 2 straight hours. They wanted 9%. I wanted 6%. We landed on 8%, a 6% channel fee plus a 2% sales commission. It was more expensive than selling domestically, but the margins in US dollars made the math sing. I repriced the F1 at $369. The T1 at $159 and $189. In America, that was a week's wages for a college student. In China, the same product cost 2 months' salary. Same hardware, different universe, but hardware alone was a house with no roof. My son had warned me about that, though he did not know he was warning me. One evening back in Shanghai, weeks before the trip, I had stood outside his bedroom door and listened to his thoughts drift like smoke. Apple is launching iTunes at the end of the year. Steve Jobs is a master negotiator. Once he locks down the record labels, licensing fees will skyrocket. If anyone wants to compete, they have to move first. They have to build the moat before the castle even exists. So, I built the moat. I named it Music Box, a digital music platform, legal, licensed, seamless, bundled with every Fenian device. I flew back to that Manhattan steakhouse and negotiated with the copyright associations until my throat was raw. Joe Kai, the sharp-eyed envoy IDG had assigned to me, saved me from my own ambition. He told me to forget about locking down all 4 associations. 2 was enough. ASCAP and BMI. Between them, 70 to 80% of every popular song in America. Enough to fill the library, enough to block the door. I signed ASCAP at 11.5 million a year, BMI at 10.8. 20-year contracts, exclusivity clauses, first refusal renewals. When I put the pen down, my shirt was soaked through, but the moat was dug. And then I went home and dug another one. The IDG deal closed the same week. I traded them 10% of Fengtian for $10 million in cash. And their last 5% of Tencent, valued at $3 million, converted into Fengtian shares. 13% total, a fair price for a $100 million valuation. But the real prize was the penguin. When the paperwork cleared, I held 53% of Tencent, more than half of a company that my son's thoughts told me would one day be worth more than most countries' GDP. 53%. I let that number sit in my chest for a while. It was warm. Lin Wan flew to New York 5 days later with a team of 3. She registered the US branch, leased office space, coordinated logistics with Walmart, launched Music Box's storefront on Amazon. She worked 18-hour days and never once complained. I promoted her to CEO of overseas operations because she had earned it, and because I needed someone in that chair who would not sleep until the shelves were full. The shelves filled fast. First week, 8,000 units through Walmart. Amazon sold out completely. Pre-orders backed up into the next month. Second week, after the full distribution rollout, 34,000 units. F1 was the star. $369, and American kids lined up outside electronics departments like it was a concert. The touch wheel, the brushed aluminum, the music box library. Chinese hardware with the kind of design people expected from Cupertino at half the price. Lin Wan called me from New York, barely keeping her voice level. "It has blown up," she said. Completely blown up. I stood at my office window in Pudong and looked out at the Huangpu River and thought about a phrase my son had mumbled once in his sleep. The future belongs to whoever builds the ecosystem. He was 7. He was talking about a company that did not yet exist. And he was right. Back home, the numbers kept climbing. Legend Network hit 125 million yuan in May. Fengtian's 40 new stores were printing money. The martial arts tournament drove concurrent players past 2 million. Zhao Ya was promoted to vice president of domestic operations. I signed a company-wide salary raise. Every employee, every division, effective immediately. Su Qing handed me the June projections, and the combined monthly revenue line crossed 150 million yuan. I looked at that number on the spreadsheet. I looked at it for a long time. A man from Linjiang, a laid-off cotton mill worker, monthly revenue, 150 million yuan. The corporate restructure formalized what had been true for months. I was chairman. Lin Wan ran the world outside China. Zhao Ya ran the world inside it. Su Qing kept the money moving. Zhou Hai kept the hardware evolving. And underneath all of it, invisible, unacknowledged, a 7-year-old boy sat at his desk doing homework and occasionally thinking thoughts that bent the course of an entire industry. I controlled internet cafes in 30 provinces, a gaming empire with 2 million daily players, a hardware brand on Walmart shelves in America, 53% of Tencent, prime real estate on the Bund, in Pudong, in Beijing, a digital music platform racing to beat Apple to the finish line, an electric vehicle company with a motor technology no one else in China had. 9 months, all of it. 9 months since a severance envelope and a slamming door. I came home late that evening. June heat. The Pudong apartment was quiet. Warm light spilled from under my son's door. I walked down the hallway and stopped. The door was cracked open, just an inch. Through the gap, I could see him sitting at the computer, headphones hanging around his neck, fingers tapping the desk to a rhythm only he could hear. He was humming that melody, the one that had swept the country, the one the entire internet had sung for weeks. Daleng, 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 daleng. He hummed it softly, off-key, the way children hum when they think no one is listening. I leaned against the doorframe. His thoughts drifted in, easy and warm, like smoke from a candle. Dad has been so busy lately. He is always on the phone, always flying somewhere, but he seems happy, happier than before. I wonder if he knows how lucky he is. Everything just keeps working out for him. The internet cafes, the game, even that MP3 thing. I barely mentioned it, and he already built a whole company. It is like the universe just gives him whatever he wants. The boy shook his head and smiled to himself. But that is my dad, the hardest working lucky man in China. I stood there in the hallway, shoulder against the doorframe, and I did not move. The air conditioning hummed. His melody drifted. Daleng, daleng. His fingers tapped the desk. Lucky. The word sat in my chest like a stone wrapped in velvet. He thought I was lucky. This boy, this old soul who had lived an entire life before this one, who carried the map of the future inside his skull, who had handed me every answer without knowing he was being heard. He looked at his father and saw a lucky man. He did not see the nights I stayed awake replaying his thoughts, terrified I had misunderstood. He did not see the calculator I kept in my desk drawer, the one I used to convert his daydreams into business plans. He did not see the way I paused outside his door every single evening, holding my breath, waiting for the next fragment. He saw luck and hard work and a dad who loved him. That was enough. That was more than enough. I thought about telling him. I had thought about it 1,000 times, sitting across from him at dinner, walking him to school, watching him sleep. The sentence was always there, fully formed, pressing against my teeth. Son, I can hear everything you think, but I never said it. And standing in that hallway, listening to him hum a melody that had made us millions, watching his shoulders rise and fall with each breath, I understood why I never would. Because the moment I told him, the thoughts would stop, or change, or guard themselves. And then I would just be a father again, an ordinary, lucky, hard-working father with no map and no compass and no voice drifting through a cracked door to guide him. But more than that, more than strategy, more than protecting the advantage. If I told him, he would carry it. The weight of knowing his father had built an empire on his unguarded mind. He would wonder which of his thoughts I had used. He would edit himself. He would go quiet. And I would rather lose everything, every company, every building, every share, then make my son go quiet. Deleng, deleng, he hummed. I listened. The warm light from his room fell across my shoes. Some secrets are not kept out of shame. Some secrets are kept because they are the kindest thing you will ever do for someone you love. I did not correct the boy. I never will.